Hello, this is Nostradamus, and this is Phone Age News. I hope you're all well, and that the pills are working. I've been in a proper downer the last week or two, but I join you today with a little teeny tiny bit of hopium in my heart. Yes, you heard me right. Hopium. Don't get me wrong, we've still got to get our shit together on this planet and sort out this mess that we're creating. But Mother Nature may be buying us a little bit of extra time. Let me explain. So, as you probably all know, we are entering the period of grand solar minimum. And I've been giving more and more thought recently as to how this may affect the Earth's climate. And we don't really know how deep or how long this effect's going to last. So,
what we gonna do right here is go back, way back into time.
let's take a look at what's happened in the past. I'm going to talk about the Maunder minimum. The Maunder minimum is the most famous cold period of the Little Ice Age. Temperatures plummeted in Europe. The growing season became shorter by more than a month. The number of snowy days increased from a few to 20 to 30. The ground froze to several feet. Alpine glaciers advanced all over the world. Glaciers in the Swiss Alps encroached on farms and buried villages. Tree lines in the Alps dropped. Seaports were blocked by sea ice that surrounded Iceland and Holland for about 20 miles. Wine grape harvests diminished and cereal grain harvests failed, leading to mass famines. Millions died. The Thames River and canals and rivers of the Netherlands froze over during the winter. The population of Iceland decreased by about half. In parts of China, warm weather crops that had been grown for centuries were abandoned. In North America, early European settlers experienced exceptionally severe winters. There's the frozen Thames in London in 1663. And here's a graph showing when the sun was in a deep minimum and came out of its minimum. And we had another smaller minimum with different spells of cold weather, and since 1900 with temperatures have increased. So it's showing like during the Maunder minimum a temperature drop of about 1.5 degrees C, with more than 2 degrees in some years. This diagram is showing that the Maunder minimum lasted in total for about 55 years. So that's across 5 solar cycles with virtually no sunspots at all, or hardly any. You can see how severe it was and how that went on to affect the world's climate in such a way. The Maunder minimum was preceded by the Sporer minimum about 1410 to 1540 AD. That lasted 130 years. And the Wolf minimum 1290 to 1320 AD. Each of these periods is characterized by low numbers of sunspots, significant changes in the rate of production of carbon-14. That's how they can actually measure it and get the information in the atmosphere and cooler global climates. During the Maunder minimum, almost no sunspots occurred. The Dalton sunspot minimum, which occurred between 1790 and 1830, was also a time of deep global cooling, as was the period from 1890 to 1915. A more modest global cooling from 45 to 1977 was also a time of sunspot minima. So you see, this happens quite regular, and we're due a deep one, by the looks of it. It's just a natural thing. The correlation between sunspots and global climate is remarkable. There's lots of good information on here. See when the solar activity dips, and there's the Maunder minimum. The world climate responds. Quite just 1.5 degrees C, and we see how severe the effects are. It takes a small change in temperature globally overall to have massive effects on the climate. Because we're all worrying about it going in the other direction, warming by 1.5 degrees. Let's move on to historic UK. The Thames Frost Fairs. Between 1600 and 1814, it was not uncommon for the River Thames to freeze over for up to 2 months at a time. There were 2 main reasons for this. The first was that Britain and the entire of the Northern Hemisphere was locked in what is now known as the Little Ice Age. The other catalyst was the medieval London Bridge and its piers, and specifically how closely spaced together they were. During winter, pieces of ice would get lodged between the piers and effectively dam up the river, meaning it was easier for it to freeze. Although these harsh winters often brought with them famine and death, it was the local Londoners, as enterprising and resilient as ever, who decided to make the most of it and set up the Thames Frost Fairs. In fact, between 1607 and 1814, there were a total of 7 major fairs, as well as countless smaller ones. The Frost Fair of 1683-1684. During the Great Winter of 1683-84, where even the seas of southern Britain were frozen solid for up to 2 miles from shore, the most famous frost fair was held, the Blanket Fair. The famous English writer and diarist John Evelyn described it in extensive detail. Painting from 1677, you can see how thick the ice would have been on the Thames. There's more ice there then than there is in the Arctic today. Amazing. I just think that could happen again. Because of our sun. I'm now on the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. This is from 2008, it doesn't really matter. What I wanted to read was this bit here. The sun goes through roughly an 11-year cycle of activity, from stormy to quiet and back again. Solar activity often occurs near sunspots, dark regions on the sun caused by concentrated magnetic fields. The solar irradiance measurement is much higher during solar maximum when sunspot cycle and solar activity is high, versus solar minimum when the sun is quiet and there are usually no sunspots. The fluctuations in the solar cycle impact Earth's global temperature by about only 0.1 degrees Celsius, slightly hotter during solar maximum and cooler during solar minimum. So we saw during the morning minimum reductions of up to 2 degrees Celsius, and this is saying the difference between solar maximum and minimum is just 0.1 degrees. I suppose it could have a cumulative effect if you got a deep minimum lasting 50 years. But I believe there's other mechanisms at work. So, without further ado, here is the latest cow fart report. Anyone that's seen my previous videos will know that I've been measuring methane levels on the NOAA website from the 2 METOP satellites in orbit around the Earth since early March of this year. And over the summer, we've seen an increase of about 20 parts per billion from a low here to a high here. But over the last 3 weeks, we've seen a steady decrease, and it's 4.7 parts per billion in just 3 weeks. Drop off. High up in the atmosphere at 300 millibars, we've seen it go from 1861 in mid-June up to a height in early last month of almost 1892, an increase of over 30 parts per billion. Where the graph goes a bit wonky when the data from the satellites was a bit messed up. So we could probably ignore this and pretend it's a straight line, because this is proper data. And these 2 weeks, the data wasn't right, because that's why I highlighted it in yellow. Estimated. I've obviously estimated it too low. But as you can see, over the past 3 weeks, it's dropped 7 parts per billion. And this is a faster rate than what should be happening naturally, which I did discuss in a previous video, the half-life of methane in the atmosphere and all that. So just what is the process that removes methane from the atmosphere? The atmosphere, and more precisely the troposphere, is the largest sink for methane. Methane in the troposphere reacts with hydroxyl OH radicals, forming mainly water and carbon dioxide. In total, this reaction accounts for about 500 million tonnes of methane each year. An indirect effect of atmospheric methane oxidation is that it can magnify the effects of other pollutants. Increased methane in the atmosphere means fewer OH radicals and so less oxidizing power in the atmosphere as a whole. Some methane, about 40 million tonnes a year, is oxidized in the same way but in our stratosphere. So what it's saying is the rate of decay of methane in the atmosphere depends on the amount of these hydroxyl radicals that are floating about. So where do hydroxyl radicals come from? They are called the detergent of the atmosphere. This explains how the hydroxyl radical works to cleanse the atmosphere of harmful trace gases. What happens to the millions of tons of gases that nature and humankind lob into the atmosphere every year? Fortunately, their rate of accumulation is countered by the atmosphere's ability to cleanse itself of most of these so-called trace gases, especially those in chemically reduced form. Through chemical changes initiated by sunlight, photooxidation, or photolysis, such trace gases are transformed into products that are more easily removed by rain and snow or that deposit directly onto the Earth's surface. Introducing OH, the hydroxyl radical. Although it makes up about a fifth of our atmosphere, oxygen is not the main oxidant. Other molecules that are produced naturally in the atmosphere, including ozone, the nitrate radical, and the hydroxyl radical, are much more reactive, even if their atmospheric concentrations are low. Radicals are highly reactive because they have unpaired electrons which tend to transfer to other molecules. I hope you're following what I'm on about. I'm trying to keep it simple as possible. We can follow the creation of OH and how it reacts to cleanse the atmosphere through a series of chemical reactions. OH is formed in the atmosphere when ultraviolet light from the sun strikes ozone in the presence of water vapour. The initial reaction involves the photolysis of ozone by solar radiation. So when ozone is hit by ultraviolet light, it's split into O2 and O. Then the oxygen atom, O, reacts with water vapour to produce two OH radicals. And then the radicals go on to destroy methane. So what I'm thinking is during a solar minimum, you get all these extra cosmic rays coming in. And cosmic rays are a lot faster and more powerful than ultraviolet. It's a much higher particle smashing into these ozone molecules. So during the solar minimum, much more ozone is getting split and more hydroxyl radicals are being produced, which is destroying methane. I think during these solar minimums, especially the ones in the past where the temperatures dropped so severely, that the methane is being taken out of the atmosphere. And that's why the consequences and why the climate is reacting much more than what you would expect. It's not just the slight drop in temperature from the actual loss of sunlight, but the cosmic rays that are allowed in are inadvertently, by this process, removing one of the more profound greenhouse gases. Here on spaceweather.com, see I've had 74% of sun spotless days so far this year. Is already more than the minimum in 2008. The thermosphere is cooling down a little bit since last time we had a look. Here's the neutron counts. Gives you an idea of how much cosmic radiation is hitting the Earth. It's getting to almost record levels. It will go much higher as we go deeper into the minimum. California cosmic ray balloons. It's hit its height in last month, but it sunk down a bit, but it's going back, it'll go back up. So, will this grand solar minimum pause global warming? Or even backtrack it a bit? We may go back to pre-war climate. But nothing's going to affect the amount of CO2 that's in the atmosphere, which is still being added to day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. So if we do happen to get a reprieve and a bit more time, something's going to have to be done about the carbon dioxide and other pollutants before the sun fires back up into action. And we don't know how deep this minimum's going to be or how long is it going to last. We're still destroying nature. All the animals and plants all going extinct. Anyway, that's my theory. While we're on spaceweather.com, let's just refresh this, see if there's been any more. 83 there. Let's have a look. Oh. On November the 5th, the network reported 83. That's a lot. I did some of them fireworks, and they thought it was meteors. That's a lot. That be a good time to look up at the skies if you've got no clouds. Near Earth asteroids. This one skimmed the atmosphere. Only 1 meter. half a moon away. 0.3 lunar distance is 8 metres. 0.5, 0.4. A lot of close ones. Here's one here, due for flyby next week on the 13th. 144 metres. Coming within 4 moons. Right, on with the show. Here's some good news from last week. Hunter dies after being gored by a deer that he shot. Hooray! Hunters give a lot of excuses for getting enjoyment out of killing innocent wildlife. They either rationalise it by saying they eat what they kill, or that they're just abiding by the laws of nature. It's hard to rationalise the blood sport when there's no shortage of meat taken from animals that were bred for slaughter at the local supermarket. It would be easier to accept if the humans and wildlife went at it face to face. Killing a deer with a gun is a pretty cowardly act, but going at it fist to antler takes considerable grit. In a rare feat, an unarmed deer apparently killed an armed hunter in Arkansas. 66-year-old Thomas Alexander died on Tuesday, October the 22nd, after a bizarre incident while hunting in Yellville in northern Arkansas. I've worked for the Game and Fish Commission for 20 years, and it's one of the stranger things that's happened, Keith Stevens, the Chief of Communications with the agency, told KY3. Alexander shot a buck with a muzzle loader and went to check on it to make sure it was dead, and it attacked him. The Game and Fish Commission recommends that hunters do not approach a downed deer for at least 30 minutes. I don't know how long he left it there, but he went up to check it to make sure it was dead, and evidently it wasn't, Stevens said. It got back up, and he had several puncture wounds on his body. Oh. Rescue workers were able to retrieve Alexander's remains from the woods, but the deer was nowhere to be found. We haven't found the deer. We've had 2 K9 units in the area, but it's begun to rain, so that's hampered efforts. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission isn't sure if Alexander was killed by the goring or whether he had a heart attack after the confrontation with the deer. He was able to call his family after the attack, but stopped breathing shortly after. Stevens says there was a similar goring a few years back in the town of Ashley, but no one died. Pity. There was somebody that did get stuck by a buck's antlers, and this was about 4 years ago, and it was pretty significant, but they did survive. Oh. I wonder if his last words were, "Oh dear." Now, I wonder whether you've seen this story from the Ritz, South India's premier Uber lifestyle magazine. Have you got an Uber lifestyle? Giant Burger. A joint in Bangkok is rocking the internet with its giant burger, almost 6 kilograms. The patty is topped with fried onion rings, bacon slices, and covered with mayonnaise. Mmm. The joint named Chris Steaks and Burgers is offering a cash prize of 10,000 baht for anyone who can finish the burger in 9 minutes.
Did somebody say just eat?
And it's hi-ho, you fat bastard. You had all the pies now, baby. You've never seen a salad. You had all the pies, you fat bastard.
I came across someone with a funny name the other day. My American viewers may already be familiar with her, but for everybody else, let me introduce you to Crystal Ball. Crystal Marie Ball is an American journalist, politician, and news talk anchor on Rising with the Hills, Crystal Ball, and Sega Engetta, a news program hosted by The Hill. She is also a businesswoman and has previously been a certified public accountant. Ball has made multiple appearances as a political commentator and Democratic strategist on television news channels, including Fox News, CNN, and CNBC. She was previously a contributor under contract for MSNBC and a regular contributor to the HuffPost. Ball was the Democratic Party nominee for Congress in Virginia's 1st Congressional District in the 2010 election, losing to Republican incumbent Rob Whitman. I bet she didn't see that coming. I bet she got some stick at school. Crystal Ball. Ball was born on November the 24th, 1981. Her parents, Edward and Rosemarie Ball, were a physicist and a teacher, respectively. The name Crystal came from her father, a physicist who did his dissertation on crystals. She has two older sisters, Holly and Heidi. I bet they got ribbed at school as well. Volleyball and head the ball. I bet they got called. This is Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of SNP, who thinks it'd be a fandabby-dozy idea for Scotland to gain independence from the UK. You want to know what I think? You can keep your haggis and your kilts and your sporrans and your bagpipes and rebuild Hadrian's Wall.
Build that wall, 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 build that wall.
Fucking hate bagpipes. And that twat Andy Murray. Guess that's bye-bye to me Scottish subscriber. Bye. I've been going on a while now and I've still got 2 items of impending doom I want to go over in some detail, so I better crack on. I'll try and speed through it. So, here we go. Here on the National Geographic, we've got a young lady pumping water into a bucket in a Bangladesh village. I want to talk about groundwater. Important underground sources are shrinking. Groundwater is the water that seeps into the earth and is stored in aquifers, areas of soil, sand and rock that are capable of holding liquid. The water sits in between particles or in cracks and fissures. These saturated underground areas, some replenished by rain and snow, others not, can be found close to the Earth's surface, or hundreds of feet underground. blah blah blah. Threats to this underground source increase as population and development accelerate. Agricultural and urban runoff, tainted with chemical pesticides and fertilizers, seeps into groundwater sources, as does gas from leaking underground tanks. But the biggest threat, overtapping this limited resource. Taxed by political, economic and development pressures, some groundwater sources are now facing depletion. The solution may rely on cooperation, often across political borders. Good luck with that. And better management policies. The overpumping of groundwater is causing water tables to fall across large areas of northern China, India, Pakistan, Iran, the Middle East, Mexico, and the western United States. The States is the world's third largest irrigator after China and India. The Ogallala Aquifer, which spans parts of 8 states from southern South Dakota to northwest Texas, is steadily being depleted. The Ogallala provides 30% of the groundwater used for irrigation in the US, and as of 2005, a volume equivalent to 2/3 the water in Lake Erie had been depleted. Running dry, competing for water on a thirsty planet. A washerman wrings out clothes at an open-air laundromat in Bangalore, India on March the 13th. Growing populations, more farming and economic growth, climate change and a rush of people to cities are all increasing pressure on the world's limited water supplies. In India's Silicon Valley tech hub of Bangalore, where gleaming office complexes and apartment blocks have sprouted faster than the plumbing to serve them, only 60% of the water the city needs each day arrives through its water pipes. Much of the rest is pumped from groundwater wells and delivered to homes and offices by a fleet of private and government tanker trucks that growl through the streets of the city of 12 million. But Bangalore's groundwater is running dry. A government think tank last year predicted the city, like others in India, including New Delhi, could run out of usable groundwater as early as 2020 as aquifers deplete. I showed you in a previous video they had to use trains this year to bring water to the people, and it's not free. By 2030, half of India's population, now about 1.4 billion, may lack enough drinking water, the report predicted. Well, it'll be before 2030, because the shit's going to hit the fan in 2020. Around the world, fresh water is fast becoming a dangerously scarce resource, driving a surge in fights to secure supplies and fears over rising numbers of deaths in water conflicts. Growing populations, more farming and economic growth, climate change and a rush of people to cities are all increasing pressure on the world's limited water supplies, researchers say. The farmers have been committing suicide in droves in India because the wells are all run dry already. There's no water left. 2 billion people are now using water much faster than natural resources. In places from Africa to the Middle East, big rivers are drying out and the population is increasing. Demand is piling up and we can't supply the people with water and food. We see conflicts over water, unfortunately, almost everywhere around the world now as competition grows over the scarce resource. Yeah, it's happening everywhere at the same time. simultaneously all around the planet. All the groundwater's been used up for intensive farming. A lot of our food supply relies on groundwater, and there's only a trickle of it left. They use it to grow rice, waste it on cotton, corn, wheat. They can't grow most of it without irrigation from the aquifers, and they're all running dry. Los Angeles, which built its growth on water sucked from distant Owens and Colorado rivers, is looking to capture stormwater and more rain to recharge its own aquifers as climate change and competition threaten its old supplies. Oh, if they don't get the rain, the crops are dead. It's a riverbed in South Africa. It used to be a riverbed. In increasingly parts of southern Africa, worsening water shortages in 2017 led South Africa's Cape Town to launch a public countdown to day zero, when it feared the city's taps would run dry. I can't read all this because I'll be here all night. This is on Place. Here's a Washington Post report. Where the world's running out of water in one map. Many of the world's most important food-producing regions depend on fresh water from massive underground aquifers that have built up over thousands of years. The Ogallala Aquifer in the Midwestern United States, the Upper Ganges sustain in India and Pakistan. Yet many of those aquifers are now being sucked dry by irrigation and other uses faster than they can be replenished by rainwater. It's unclear when many of these aquifers will be completely emptied. Scientists are still trying to measure how much fossil water these aquifers actually hold, but it's a worrisome trend. 1.7 billion people rely on aquifers that are rapidly being depleted, and once they're gone, it'll take thousands of years to refill them. Western Mexico. Oh, that's the growing belts of America, the food belts, and it's purely reliance on the groundwater, and the wells are going dry. They're having gone down 200 feet to get anything in some places. People's packing up. North Arabia, Persian Aquifer, Upper Ganges, where 1 billion people rely on that one. That's going dry next year. And the North China Plain, they're suffering there as well. In some areas, the imbalance is staggering. In northern India, the underground reservoir there would essentially need 54 times as much rain as it currently gets to replenish the water that's being used by farmers and the local population. So they need to reduce the consumption by a factor of 54 for it to just stay at the low level it is now. Oh dear. 27% of the United States irrigated farmland depends on the Ogallala Aquifer, a key region for livestock, corn, wheat and soy, but it's slowly getting depleted. In some counties, the water table is dropping by as much as 2 feet per year. And as David B. Hello notes, once the Ogallala gets drained, it would take 6,000 years to recharge with rainfall. Over to The Guardian. I don't know how we come back from this. Australia's big dry sucks life from once proud towns. Australia is experiencing one of its most severe droughts on record, resulting in desperate water shortages across large parts of New South Wales and southern Queensland. Dams in some parts of western New South Wales have all dried up, with rainfall levels through the winter in the lowest 10% of historical records in some areas. I know they've had a little bit of relief, a bit of rain the last few days. It's just a drop in a bucket. The crisis in the far west of the state became unavoidable after the mass fish kills along the lower Darling River last summer, but now much bigger towns closer to the coast, including Dubbo, are also running out of water. They took all the water out of the river to grow cotton, and everything's dying. It seems unthinkable that the city of Dubbo, with a population of 40,000 and home to the Western Plains Zoo, could be facing the prospect of running out of water by mid-2020, next year. But as the drought enters its second summer, that's exactly what is facing the main town in the central western New South Wales. Inflows into the Macquarie River are at historic lows. The water should be up to there. All drying up. Utter nothing. It's at 4.5% capacity and dwindling rapidly as unseasonably high temperatures hit the region. The Burrangdon Dam, 6 times the size of Sydney Harbour, evaporating. Scientific American. The Ogallala Aquifer, saving a vital US water source. The massive underground water source feeds the middle third of the country, but is disappearing fast. Can it be conserved? Well, this is from 2009. Didn't notice that when I loaded it up. Some facts about the underground water source. If spread across the whole United States, the aquifer would cover all 50 states with 1.5 feet of water. It takes 6,000 years to refill. More than 90% of the water pumped is used to irrigate crops. $20 billion a year in food and fibre depend on the aquifer. All that's gone. On America's high plains, crops in early summer stretch to the horizon, field after verdant field of corn, sorghum, soybeans, wheat and cotton, framed by immense skies now blue, now scarlet streets. This 800-mile expanse of agriculture looks like it could go on forever. It can't. The Ogallala Aquifer, the vast underground reservoir that gives life to these fields, is disappearing. In some places the groundwater is already gone. This is the breadbasket of America, the region that supplies at least 1/5 of the total annual US agricultural harvest. If the aquifer goes dry, more than $20 billion worth of food and fibre will vanish from the world's markets, and scientists say it will take natural processes 6,000 years to refill the reservoir. So we've not only got to worry about what's going on above ground with temperatures and crops. I think we've got to think more about what's going on below ground, where we're getting the water from. To enable us to grow the crops in the first place. And these aquifers are everywhere. So much food growth is depending on them. And they're all expected to run dry next year. Hey ho. Now we go from water talk to lack of pork. At the pig site, experts predict swine fever could wipe out a quarter of global pig herd. With the recent comments from the OIE on the severity of the ASF situation, a new report suggests that over 25% of the world's population will die from the disease. The impact of African swine fever in the last 12 months has been devastating for the global pig herd, and experts are predicting that the situation will only deteriorate in the months to follow. The impact of African swine fever in the last 12 months has been devastating for the global pig herd, and experts are predicting that the situation will only deteriorate in the months to follow. Continuing outbreaks of the disease in Asia, including big pork-producing nations, China, Philippines, Vietnam, have resulted in millions of deaths. Actual numbers are predicted to be much higher than the figures published by authorities. New outbreaks continue to emerge in Europe. Latvia, Slovakia, Romania and Hungary are all confirmed new cases this week. They like the pork in Hungary, so if all the pigs died, there'd be even more Hungary. Belgium has also announced it will be instigating a mass cull of wild boar, one of the major vectors for transmission of the disease from affected to unaffected regions. With the virus now confirmed in 50 countries, the disease is threatening to move further west towards some of the biggest pork producing regions, including Denmark and the Netherlands. Biosecurity and border control has been heightened in the US, Canada, and Brazil, as one rogue case could put them on the map of infected nations. This week, The Guardian reported on the announcement from the OIE that around a quarter of the global pig population is expected to die as a result of ASF. The massive deficit in the Asian pig herd has caused unparalleled rises in pork prices, with the pork retail price in China jumping 9.2% in a week. Meat packers globally are looking to establish export agreements with China to take advantage of the supply gap. US packing company JBS recently announced its commitment to producing ractopamine-free pork to ensure that it can now export to China, where the growth-enhancing substance is banned in all pork production. They're fucking about with nature's causing this. Tells you how to prevent the disease from spreading. They won't stop. It's going to go worldwide. It'll kill more than a quarter of them. You bet your life. Yeah. Coconuts, Manila. Smuggled pork from China caused African swine flu, Agriculture Department says. The Agricultural Secretary yesterday blamed the African swine fever outbreak in the Philippines on the arrival of infected pork smuggled from China, citing another bust of illegal and contaminated products. In a statement, Agriculture Secretary William Dar said that 2 seized containers carrying illegally smuggled pork products from China tested positive for African swine fever. The shipments, which arrived 2 weeks ago in the port of Manila, were falsely declared as potato paste, tomato paste, and vermicelli, and were consigned to Geneti International Trading, a company based in Binondo, Manila. That concludes really that this has been introduced by bringing it here, smuggling it here, introducing it here, Dar said in a press conference yesterday, saying that contaminated pork scraps were likely dumped in Rizal only to be collected and repurposed as pig feed. The department also pointed out that chorizo and hot dogs made by Pampanga-based meat manufacturer Mikini Food Corporation, which were pulled from stores last week, had officially tested positive for ASF. The department reiterated that pork is still safe to eat despite the spread of ASF in the country. As of October, some 20,000 pigs had been culled. The Times of India. Swine flu returns to haunt Lucknow with 55-fold rise in cases. It is not only dengue that is creating havoc in the state, as swine flu, H1N1 virus, has also raised its ugly head, registering a whopping 55-fold rise in the number of cases as compared to last year. While only 37 cases and 6 deaths were reported in 2018, at least 2,086 people have been tested positive, and 35 of them have lost their lives till October this year. Lucknow has registered the highest 550 cases this year. According to experts, swine flu cases will increase in coming days as the virus flourishes from January to March and August to October. I found this on Quora, where someone asked the question, can African swine fever affect dogs? And someone's replied, in my country, Romania, there has been discoveries of African swine fever, and about a week after it, a lot of my dogs started dying. This is in September 2018. They had absolutely no health problems and were vaccinated, so I'm really wondering if maybe African swine fever can be transferred to dogs. One of my neighbour owns pigs, and my dogs could have easily gotten near them. They showed all the signs of AFS, and I'm afraid that the last 2 remaining dogs from my litter of 8, plus 2 other older dogs, could die, and I'm really worried about them. And then this certified veterinary technician answers, dogs can get different types of flu. Most commonly they get H3N2 and H3N8, but cases of H1N1 have been found in pets. They can transmit the virus among their own species or get it from humans, but giving it to people is far less common. Viruses are generally species specific, but flu can have enough of a mutation to affect most mammal species. And then somebody else says short answer is no. African swine fever only affects domestic and wild pigs since it was first detected in Africa in 1907. The ASF virus has only affected swines. You can read more about how ASF has been affecting the hog population recently in the World Organization for Animal Health website. Well, if it's going to infect at least a quarter of the world's population of pigs, it's going to have one massive opportunity to mutate into all sorts of different strains. And if all the pigs die, we're going to have to replace one of the lines in Old MacDonald. There won't be any pigs left to sing about. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on that farm he had a 3D printed, genetically modified synthetic protein rich pork chop, E-I-E-I-O. Old MacDonald caught swine flu. He was a mad psycho. And finally, news from France. Oui, oui, la la. Disease outbreak news, 1st of November. On the 9th of October, the French authorities reported an Zika virus case in Hayes, Var department, France. The case had reported symptom onset on the 29th of July. No travel history to Zika endemic countries was reported for the patient or partner. Since this notification, French authorities reported an additional 2 probable Zika cases identified through active case finding in Hayes. In the same area and same time frame, symptom onsets of the 3 cases from the 6th to the 15th of August All 3 patients have recovered. You don't recover from Zika though. It stays with you. Epidemiological and entomological field investigations by French authorities are still ongoing to determine the possible route of transmission for these cases, prevent further spread and detect possible associated cases. They haven't got a clue where this has come from. In France? Zika, come out of nowhere. Well. Well, that's all we've got time for, boys and girls. Remember, don't forget to get your flu jabs, because your government says it's important to have them. Okay? You know what's good for you. Try to stay happy, fit, healthy and safe, no matter what gets thrown at you. And love you all, and I might see you next time. Goodbye.